Hello and welcome to the 1990s. It's a decade that represents arguably the highest and the lowest points of Bob's career, but that's just the price of being a highly eccentric artist. Bob only recorded 4 studio albums this decade, so there's less to cover in this video than the first 3. Because of that, there are some extra goodies that I'm going to add to this video. The first is some very fun channel housekeeping highlighted by some very happy news. The second relates to the never-ending tour, NET, which started a little bit earlier but really picked up steam in the 1990s. I'll be sad but not offended if you skip these parts, but they will be interesting, especially to the biggest Bob fans among you. So if you think you're the biggest Bob fan, keep watching. 1. Housekeeping. I am very happy to share that due directly to the support that you've given these videos, I'm now capable of making a little bit of money from them. First and foremost, thank you. Now, this is obviously good news for me because as a member of a capitalist society, I need capital to do fun things like eat food and live somewhere. But if you like these videos, it's also good news for you because it'll let me invest more time in making them. Which leads me to a question. Much to my dismay, Bob has released only 40 studio albums, so we're gonna run out of albums to grade pretty soon. But I want to keep making videos for you. I have a bunch of ideas on how to do this, including tier listing the albums of other artists from that era. I also want to record more covers of the songs from these albums. I am, after all, a performing singer-songwriter, and reinterpreting my favorite music is every bit as important to me as staging Shakespeare plays would be for a writer-director. And by the way, you can check out my original music on Spotify. But I also want to hear from you. If you're feeling loquacious, let me know in the comments what kind of content you want to see. More tier lists, more cover videos, deep dives into albums or songs in the tier lists. If you've got an idea, pause the video now and let me know. Lastly, if you haven't already, I want to just request again that you like this video and subscribe to my page. If you're wondering why YouTubers always ask you that, it's because our compensation is directly tied to how well we engage our audiences. Now, you obviously have no obligation to prioritize my financial well-being, but if you've enjoyed these analyses and you want to help me make room for more, a like, a comment, and a subscription go a long way. And now for some bootlegs. 2. The Never-Ending Tour, NET, in the 1990s. The 1990s was, at the time, the decade in which Bob recorded the fewest studio albums. That was partly due to a lack of motivation for writing new songs, but it was also due to the fact that he was investing much more energy in touring. The NET, which started in 1988 and continues to this day, had really become Bob's main focus. If you're a casual fan, you might not have realized that Bob's been playing about 100 shows a year since 1988, or that I've seen 10 of them. In the case of the 1990s, the arc of his career is described fairly well by the studio albums, but it's described much better by a string of never-ending tour performances whose quality ranges from laughable to sublime. For those of you not deeply acquainted with Bob's never-ending tour bootlegs, I wanted to give you a few highlights from the 1990s. 1. New Haven, Connecticut, January 12th, 1990. 50 songs, Dancing in the Dark, Help Me Make It Through the Night. This was essentially a live rehearsal for Bob's 1990 tour, and it captures the ragged mania that characterized his 1990 shows. They were certainly not beautiful, but they had the kind of perverse intrigue that only comes from an artist setting fire to their most classic work. 2. Stuttgart, Germany, June 17th, 1991. To me, 1991 is unquestionably the nadir of Bob's touring career. His voice is utterly unintelligible, he forgets the words to songs, and he gives introductions to songs where the first part of the sentence and the second part of the sentence have never met. I don't recommend this show because it's good, but rather because it's the low watermark of the 1990s, after which all else was uphill. 3. Woodstock 94, August 14th, 1994. Circa 1993, Bob decides to get his act together. Don't quote me on this, but I remember reading somewhere that one of his kids expressed concern over his drinking, and after that, Bob quit drinking cold turkey. Whether it was that or something else, his voice got a lot clearer, his performances got more energized, and he started doing things like MTV Unplugged, or this, a terrific set at Woodstock 94. Highlights include Joker Man, which opened nearly every 1994 show, and a very moving rendition of It Ain't Me, Babe, which closed nearly all these shows. 4. San Jose, California, May 19th, 1998. By this point, Time Outta Mind had won the Grammy for Album of the Year, and Bob's career was back in gear. You can hear that in this profoundly strong set, one of the absolute best of Bob's career. If you like Bob bootlegs, there's a lot more to dig into in the 1990s, but this is a good place to start. Thus concludes our supplementary material. And now, the 1990s tier list. Forward, the grand reshuffling. The last thing I want to do before I get into the 1990s is a little bit of a reshuffling. The main one that I want to do is put The Times They Are A-Changin' and John Wesley Harding in the A tier. Ultimately, I have to accept that The Times They Are A-Changin' has a slew of classic songs on it. And I will say, John Wesley Harding in the comment section of its video got a disproportionate amount of love for its stripped minimalistic poetics. It forced me to reconsider. The only other change I want to make is moving Shot of Love from that point in the C tier to this point in the C tier. The fact of the matter is I've listened to Shot of Love much more than I've listened to those other two, and in addition to that, I just think its songs are better. It's this nice valley between him doing the intense gospel thing and then him doing the intense I'm a 1980s rock star thing, which, no you're not. Not such a grand reshuffling, but a slight reshuffling. Now, okay, fine, finally, the 1990s. 27, Under the Red Sky. This album is kind of a guilty pleasure for me. Let's just look at Wiggle Wiggle a little bit. Time magazine named it one of his worst songs. Q put it on a list of 10 terrible records by great artists. I just don't hate Wiggle Wiggle. It is a nursery rhyme, but it's true to nursery rhyme history in the sense that it is both very playful and very dark. Wiggle till you vomit fire. That's not the only instance of shockingly dark imagery in Wiggle Wiggle. Wiggle Wiggle is not the only song that has that kind of twisted fairy tale vibe to it. Under the Red Sky also does. 10,000 Men feels that way to me. 2 by 2. Handy Dandy. I honestly think that Handy Dandy is a better outlaw song than Man in the Long Black Coat from Oh Mercy. But the music in Handy Dandy is just bonkers. It feels like La Bamba. Another reason why people don't like this album is because his voice has undergone yet another level of deterioration that I'm sure nobody thought possible. Not only does it sound very ragged, it sounds like he's just waking up from a nap, and like he's surprised to find himself behind a microphone in a recording studio. For some people, this record is a bridge too far, vocally speaking. But for me, it's not. In terms of his minor albums, and evidence of a specifically Dylan-esque poetics that's not trying to be anything other than that, this is a better example of it than you want to think it is. This will probably be an unpopular ranking, but I would rank this just behind Shot of Love in his C tier. 28, Good As I've Been To You, and 29, World Gone Wrong. Good As I've Been To You and World Gone Wrong are two of the Dylan albums that I've listened to the most. And not like a lot, but the most. It's specifically because I, too, perform solo a lot. It is incredibly important to me personally that I can present songs in a solo setting and still have the performances be engrossing. To me, these two albums are masterclasses in how to perform well alone. Both Good As I've Been To You and World Gone Wrong are albums of folk covers. There are no original songs on either of these albums. To me, these albums are what Self-Portrait isn't. In a lot of cases, Self-Portrait is Bob intentionally or unintentionally desecrating the songs that he's covering. It's not like these albums are polished or precise in any kind of way, but they feel like him honoring the material that made him. His guitar playing is both off the cuff and detailed. To me, there's a philosophy embedded in that the best music happens in a moment and is unplanned and doesn't necessarily depend on excellent technical prowess, although he is a very skilled guitar player. It just depends on connection to the song's spirit and to the spirit of the performance. This, to me, is what folk sounds like. Folk does not sound like the Avid Brothers to me. And neither, by the way, does folk sound like some of the more totemic folk artists from the 1960s. Folk, to me, does not sound studious. It doesn't sound polished. It sounds to me like ragged people playing songs about other ragged people. Maybe those people are themselves, or are some kind of beatified outlaw, or some kind of fiendish outlaw who deserves a sort of public crucifixion in the form of a song written about all the horrible things they did. If you're not a performing singer-songwriter, you might get less out of these albums, because you may or may not be interested in the finer points of his guitar playing, or why he sings one line with more gravel in his voice, or extending certain vowels, or commingling the vocal melody with a lick on the guitar those things may be less interesting to you. But to me, each one is just a little lesson in the overarching masterclass on how to perform alone. They deserve to be in the lower parts of Bob Dylan's A tier. And that's just the way it is. Them that don't like it can leave me alone. Or comment, or leave a comment. 30, Time Out of Mind. At the time of its release, Time Out of Mind was treated as yet another comeback album. I don't think there's an artist in the world, in any genre, who has had more comeback works than Bob Dylan. It was his first universally or near universally praised album, probably since, I don't know, Blood on the Tracks or something. He's back working with super producer Daniel Lanois. The sound on this album is largely attributable to Daniel Lanois, although Bob unquestionably had some editorial power in developing that sound as well. There are several songs on this album that I consider excellent. I do consider Lovesick to be an excellent song. I consider Cold Iron's Bound to be an excellent song. And I consider Highlands to be an excellent song. The issue I have with this album is similar to the issue that I have with The Times They're a Changin'. The songs are just so negative. A lot of them sound like the notes you write before you step out onto the ledge. Not dark yet, trying to get to heaven, standing in the doorway. It's so monochromatically negative that I kind of sicken of it after a little while. Having said that, I think what you can say about the songs on this album is that they are all written and rendered, that is, performed with care. If nothing else, they all sound good. I don't think that this collection of songs, just purely looking at the songs, is nearly as strong as Love and Theft or even Modern Times, but it's an album with a pronounced and thematically appropriate mood, which is more than you can say for a lot of his other albums, and it has several songs that are excellent and many songs that are fair to good. I think it deserves a place of honor, in part because of what it represents in the ongoing narrative of Bob's recording career, but I don't listen to this as much as my favorite Bob Dylan albums. I would put it in the very last place of his A tier. Unlike a lot of his peers from that era, he was still on his poetic odyssey. Artists like The Who or the Rolling Stones, they pretty much devolved into money-grabbing artists by then. Like, they made albums that were not essential. They went on these big tours whose primary purpose was to play hits and please audiences and capitalize on global demand, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't deserve serious consideration through an artistic lens. Bob was still on his odyssey. It continued taking him to strange and wicked and wonderful places. And you just have to respect that. And still, some of his best work is ahead of him. I encourage you once again to like this video and subscribe to my page. And as ever, thank you very much for watching.